Live from Naples, this is The Morning Break with Jane Ritter.
Morning everyone from Naples, another gorgeous day here. Lots of spring in the air, which unfortunately is affecting my eyes, my nose. But I am so looking forward to speaking to Emma Heyderman. She'll be joining me in the studio in just a minute.
Live from Naples, this is The Morning Break with Jane Ritter on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Morning everyone. We'll get that right one day soon. This morning I am absolutely delighted to have Emma joining me in the studio, as it is our virtual studio here at Teachers Talk Radio. Those of you, I was just astounded at the response on social media when I mentioned that I was talking to Emma. So many people responded with the fondest of comments. Emma has been in ELT since 1989, and she has worked for several well-known language schools, most recently as Director of Education for Lacunza International House in San Sebastian in Spain. She's also a published author, and she will tell us a little bit about that. She works as an ELT consultant and has extensive teacher training experience. So I'm very, very excited to be speaking to her. Emma, I'm just going to unmute you, and I hope it is you. Good morning.
Morning. I think it's me.
It is you. We were a bit worried about this one, weren't we? Because you're actually joining me from your holiday. Thank you so much for taking the time out to chat from your holiday in London.
That's right. That's right. Yesterday we had quite an experience. We took a train at 7:30 in the morning from our town, San Sebastian, and we finally got to London I think we got here at 9:30 at night, but we made it. So here we are.
Incredible. Well, I think if you'd flown, you may not have got there. I gather lots of people are having their flights cancelled, or they're just spending hours waiting in airports in the UK. I hope it's so. At least you did get there, Emma.
That's right. And we feel so much better for having done it. I think everybody needs to do it at least a couple of journeys a year. If you're going to take journeys, you need to do them by train.
And was the choice by train, was that environmental, or was it?
I think it's a bit of both. Being based in San Sebastian, obviously we do a lot of traveling, and I've still got my parents here in London. And I think I made the decision a couple of years ago that at least 2 of my journeys I would take by train. So of course we booked these tickets 2 years ago and then had them cancelled. So this is kind of using the vouchers that we had from 2 years ago. We've done it.
But at least they're still valid.
Yes. Good old
like
French trains, and Eurostar. They're amazing.
Yeah.
Strongly, I'd recommend it. If anyone's thinking of doing it, do it. And Paris was so lovely yesterday, as you can imagine. Gorgeous, bright sunshine. We had about 5 hours in Paris, which was lovely.
Oh, superb. So you got off and had a good lunch, I hope.
Yes. Lovely lunch.
Good. Emma, let's get on to your teaching journey. You have had quite an adventure, I believe. Can you just tell us a little bit about how you got into ELT?
I guess my journey is quite similar, and I hope that other people can relate to this and not think, oh, she's a fraud. So there I was. I did psychology at university, actually. And when I finished psychology, I went for an interview at a psychology unit, and they said, gosh, you're very, very young. what kind of psychology are you interested in? And at that point I said, well, probably, I'd worked quite a lot on play groups with kids who had various difficulties, either from broken homes or maybe they had learning difficulties or something. And I knew I wanted to kind of combine psychology with kids. And the people in this psychology unit said, you're very, very young, you haven't got a lot of life experience, and you haven't got any teaching experience. What we recommend is you go away, get some teaching experience, and come back in a couple of years. And which I thought was interesting advice. So I, in fact, at that point thought, actually, I'd also like to travel. So I did a CELTA. And once I'd done the CELTA, I went into International House in London with my CELTA certificate. And they offered me 3 positions in Spain. This was January 1989. And one of them was Girona, near Barcelona. And I said, oh, I'd love there. I'd love to go to Barcelona. I'll have that one. But they wouldn't take me for the same reason. I was too young, too inexperienced. But San Sebastian would. So I ended up in San Sebastian, met my partner, and that's 32 years, I think.
Wow.
I went in 89 and it's now 2022. Yeah, something like that. 33 years maybe. Yeah.
Incredible.
So anyway, so there I was. I started in San Sebastian and I was incredibly lucky to end up there. I didn't know a lot about it. I didn't know a lot about San Sebastian. Somebody told me, if you like food, it's the place for you. And it is. I love food and the food is amazing. But what's even more amazing is it's a small city and it's absolutely beautiful. It's kind of set on a big bay and with an island in the middle, and it is just one of the most beautiful places in the world. So I ended up here in a really large school, and the advantage of ending up in such a large school was there were so many immediate opportunities. So I was able to kind of start out at the bottom with, intermediate levels, and then little by little, I got more experience. And I think, as I mentioned to you, in my very first year, I was kind of just thrown into, a teacher had left and I was just given her classes. And I had a class of children and, I was straight off a 4-week course. My experience with children had always been kind of playing with them or being more, I'd only been a student, so kind of being more a friend to the children. So you can imagine what my classroom was like. It was
would have been fun for them.
Yeah, I mean, we did loads of playing. I can remember we did some, we made models of towns and villages and we played games, but we didn't do much English. And I can remember my first observation, the director of studies saying, well, I loved the class, but nobody spoke any English. Apparently, these are such basic things. The kids, they were playing a board game, and apparently they were even counting in Spanish. As they were going round the board, they were going uno, dos, tres. And she said, surely they know the numbers in English. So, basically, I had these huge classroom management issues going on, just because I was so inexperienced. And I thought, no, this is not what I want to do. So the next year, I moved to the adult centre and stayed there for 6-7 years, did my Delta with adults. And I thought, this is it. I found my niche. I'm an adult teacher. So the next thing that happens is, obviously after 7 years and I had my Delta, it was kind of, I began to get itchy feet again and think, oh, what next? And the school opened a new branch and they were looking for a senior teacher who would become kind of the young learner, helping other teachers with young learners. And I thought, oh gosh, my only experience was back on the play groups. But if I don't go for this job, this is kind of the job made for me. So I went for it, and really, I was really, really surprised they actually gave it to me, even though, my young learner experience was on the play groups. So I went off to Amara. On the first day, I had my first young learner class, and it was just so different because obviously now I had all the classroom management under
control. Yeah.
Under control. And I just kind of now applied it to working with the children. I had groups for 6 to 12-year-olds, some adolescents. And suddenly I just kind of thought, no, actually, this is very easy. It's just experience and confidence and actually being able to plan a class.
Definitely. I think I mean, a lot of post-CELTA teachers go into a complete panic
Yes, yes.
because they, they don't know what they're doing. But once you do get a little bit more experience behind you, it's a lot easier. So you then just continued to climb. I mean, not climb, but that sounds
Yeah,
but you did continue to just move up within.
move up. I mean, actually, in San Sebastian at that point, so what we're talking about, 1994 or 5, they had always had young learners, but it hadn't always been such a big part. So about that time, it was beginning to be, the school was by then about 75% under 18s. And they decided that they needed a young learner coordinator, which was taken by a great colleague of mine, Dave Green. So he became the young learner coordinator, and we began to get more organized. And then he was actually promoted to become a director of another center that had just opened. And the position was free. And I thought, well, why don't I apply for that? That kind of seems like that would allow me to combine the kind of experience I already had in the classroom with more, I'd then be able to move into academic management to a small extent, do a little bit of teacher training. So that was my next step. I then became the young learner coordinator. And I stayed there in that position for 3 or 4 years. I went back and I became a director of studies again, but in another centre where they had a lot of young learners.
What percentage of young learners?
So
Roughly?
by then we were pushing, the centre I worked in by then was like 90% young learners.
Wow.
And adults were now becoming, much, much lower. And I think I mentioned this to you, that actually by that stage, I was finding teaching young learners much, much easier than adults.
They're well, they're not
Yes,
less
no, they're not
demanding.
less
What do you
demanding.
think it is?
It's the classroom management. I think if you walk into a classroom with young learners, from the very beginning, you can establish some rules. So, if you begin speaking and they're speaking over you, you can quickly stop things and say to them, no, 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 in my classroom, this is how things are going to go. We're going to have moments where I'm going to speak and you're going to listen, and then we'll have activities where you're going to speak. Whereas when you go into an adult classroom and you start speaking and they speak at the same time, I find that much, much more difficult to deal with. How do you say to an adult, would you mind just being quiet and listening to me without sounding rude?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah. And the other thing is, like, you set homework with adults, or you get them to do some reading, and only 2 of them would do that. Whereas with your young learners, you set your homework and they do it to better or worse extent, but they certainly do it.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at my uni students. They are more young learners. I've got a couple who have even started sending in their homework early.
Oh my
They're
goodness.
getting,
Yeah.
it's April, but they're sort of getting ready for the end of term, doing all their extra. They have so many exams, poor things.
Yeah.
I think they're just getting ahead of themselves.
Yeah. So what do you do about things like speaking? Because I often find that kind of university age group, some of them can be quite shy and reticent. And, obviously with young learners, it's easier to get them to speak because you just kind of, you go into your reward charts or you add in other incentives. How do you deal with the university students?
I think what we've had to do, obviously through lockdown, is adapt a lot more and do a lot more they do several video tasks where they send me in work, which I think is really good for them because it gets them to focus more on content, accuracy, pronunciation, and it allows me to have that genuine interaction with them. We actually have speaking classes, and they know that that during those classes we are listening to them and we're making notes on them. I luckily get to split I have a year of about 150 students, and I split it with a colleague, or 2 colleagues actually. They do speaking classes with me and my other colleague on one day, and then writing the following week with my other colleague. So they know that in those lessons, and also in their normal lessons, we are really listening to them and making notes on them. I think having online teaching and breakout rooms makes it much easier and they know that you're listening to them.
Yes. Or you're going to come round listening to them.
I sort of zoom in, and sometimes you can hear the sort of switch from Italian to English.
Yes.
I think a lot of them really do make a very conscious effort, and they're seeing the benefits of it.
Yes.
We actually had complaints when we went back to face-to-face teaching that they weren't getting that, that the teacher is really listening to me.
Yes. No, that's right, because it actually... No, you're right, because I'm kind of thinking about a less experienced teacher who says they're monitoring and they don't actually sit and listen, or they sit and listen and kind of
note down all the mistakes.
Exactly. Whereas if with the breakout rooms, it actually kind of does. You're right. It forces you to go in there and just sit there quietly and listen. And
Yeah, no, I mean, we could talk about this all day.
Yes.
Also intrusive, non-intrusive monitoring. So if you've got your camera off and your microphone off, that they know that I'm just listening. Whereas if I want to speak, I turn my camera on and give them a little bit of feedback as they go along. It's interesting. But I think for me, it's actually a lot easier to hear them online than it is when we've got them all in a big room of you get 50 students sometimes in a room, and it's not as easy. Anyway, you then became Director of Education.
Yeah, so that was the next step. So I was then a Director of Studies, as I said, of a very large centre. We had about 800 students there, and I now had the full range of experience. So what next happened was we had some older directors who retired, because obviously these people have been in the school not since it began, but it's a very old school. I think it was established something like 1956. So we had a lot of people there who'd been there since the mid-70s, early 80s, and about 3 people retired. So there was suddenly a position for a Director of Education, and I applied and got that.
That must have been a really interesting job. I mean, I know International House does actually enable you to do lots of really interesting work.
Yes. And they, they're very professional schools, so they definitely take it very, very seriously. So this is a school which had 6,000 students. At one point, it teaches French. It still teaches French, but at one point was also teaching Chinese and Basque and Spanish. With 6,000 students. So they definitely was a need for somebody to kind of pull all the academic programs into one, get things kind of looking the same, look at the kind of level system and look at how people were progressing from one level to the next, making sure that things like the assessment made sense. So it wasn't more tricky at an elementary level than more tricky at a kind of an advanced level. I mean, when I started to look at all this, I found something, as you can imagine, some incredible incongruous things, things like intermediate students were doing one really, really easy test and then passing up to an upper intermediate level, whereas the elementary kids were having to do 7 tests, which were incredibly complicated. So it was just kind of making everything, just kind of standardizing everything, streamlining.
And hopefully streamlining it.
Yes, because the poor teachers were like, so at this level we'll be doing 6 tests and a speaking test, and at this level it's just 1 test. So that was what I worked on at that point I had a training coordinator who worked a lot with me, and together, and then of course we brought on the whole team, so there were teachers working on things, and we managed to bring everything and make it a lot more streamlined and make a lot lot
big job, but
it was
fantastic.
it was. Yeah, no, but it was great. Yeah. And it's the kind of job that never stops. It's never something that you say, oh right, well that's done, now what? I mean, what we're talking about, we always talk about there are 3 prongs to this. So it's content. So what will they actually be studying at the level? The pacing, how long will they be moving through this content? And then finally, the assessment, how will we be measuring progress? And obviously, of those 3 prongs, you're always going to have to keep looking at it. So, of course, our next challenge was when we went online was assessment, because I imagine you had the same problem, because
Yes.
paper tests, suddenly you couldn't do paper tests at the end of every term. It didn't work.
No. No. What were you using? Were you using Google
So,
or?
yeah. So at the beginning, what we did was we gave lots and lots of mini tests. So within a class, a teacher would do kind of a 15-minute mini test where the students would quickly do something on a piece of paper. And, we did all sorts of things where maybe with younger learners, it would be as simple as a spelling test and the kids would just hold up their words to the screen, or they would put the words in a private chat, or they would put their sentences in a private chat, or you would project it and they would email their sentences, or whatever. We tried lots of different things.
And I think people are still experimenting with it. I just had
Yeah.
a chat over coffee with a colleague about Google Docs and how to how to make them work for you.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
that's yeah. And then you decided to go freelance, which
Yes.
was there a reason for that?
Yes. I mean, there were two reasons, both personal and professional. So I had then been in Lacunza for 32 years. We came out of the pandemic, and everyone was exhausted. I mean, I don't think there's a teacher on the planet who didn't come out of it changed, more weary, but changed, and in a lot of ways for the better. We did learn a lot, and we did benefit from the learning. But I think we were all incredibly weary. And so on the personal level, my partner had been very lucky, and just before the pandemic had been given early retirement. So he was now at home. And once the pandemic, we came through the pandemic, he, was beginning to get, well, come on then, where are we going to start traveling to and what are we going to do next? And I was like, well, can't really, because I'm working 35 hours in the company. And the other thing is, I had also been writing at the same time. So there are a couple of books like Complete Preliminary and the Macmillan book, Get Involved, that I'd actually written side by side a 35-hour week. So I was kind of
How
triply
on earth did you
exhausted.
manage that?
Yes, I'm not very sure now, thinking about it. I think I worked 7-day weeks. By then, my kids were older. I mean, my kids were teenagers when I did Complete, and by the time I got on to Get Involved, they were university students. So they didn't need me as much, but it did mean 7-day weeks, no holidays, and it was just silly. And coming out of the pandemic, I suddenly thought, I'm tired. I've reached the top of where I'm going to get to in Lacunza. And I think it would just probably be a good idea for me now to step back, let somebody else in Lacunza take over from me and move the school forward. It probably, I felt it needed a fresh set of eyes. And they've now taken on a wonderful academic director who's taking the school in a, very, very good direction. And I thought, well, now it's time for me to go freelance so I can carry on writing. I've done a lot of teacher training, so I can carry on doing that. And I can also probably give back to the community some of the stuff I've learned from being an academic director, which is kind of the consultancy stuff.
Okay, we're going to get on to that.
Yep.
I think now is probably a good time to take a break. I can see we've got quite a lot of people in the studio with us.
Oh, great.
If they do have any questions for Emma, we'd love to hear them. So we will be back in about 5 minutes. We're just going to go to the news for now. Okay.
This episode of Teachers Talk Radio has been made possible with support from Witherslack Group, the UK's leading provider of SEN education and care. They're here to support you too through an ever-growing offer of free resources, including webinars, podcasts, articles, and events aimed at supporting teaching professionals like you. Visit their website at www.witherslackgroup.co.uk to find out more.
Are you looking to take your phonics practice forward? Then Little Wandle Letters and Sounds Revised is the programme for you. created by two schools with an excellent track record in phonics. Little Wandle Letters and Sounds Revised will help all children become readers and ensure no child is left behind. The programme offers complete support for your phonics teaching, alongside classroom resources and fully decodable readers from Collins Big Cat. To find out more, follow @LettersSounds on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, or join a free briefing by visiting littlewandlelettersandsounds.org.uk.
Introducing Bulb. With evidence-based learning at the forefront of education, let Bulb digital portfolios help reshape your educational practice. Bulb helps teachers teach and learners learn. Bulb is an easy-to-use, fully accessible digital platform that captures students' digital learning assets in one place, allowing them to evidence their learning and reflect on their growth. Our dedicated team of education specialists are on hand to ensure that Bulb fits seamlessly into all of your teaching practices. Come take a look and get a free account at bulbapp.com.
Introducing Autism Aspirational Futures, a virtual SEN conference for parents and carers. Do you work with parents or carers of students with autism? If so, this free virtual conference from Witherslack Group can support them and you. Providing inspiring talks from leading experts, offering practical advice on supporting children and young people with autism and associated needs. This very special event will take place during Autism Acceptance Week and is sure to be an enjoyable occasion for everyone wanting to develop their knowledge, understanding, and celebrate their children's amazing superpowers. Don't miss out! Register for free at witherslackgroup.co.uk today. Witherslack Group, the leading provider of schools and children's homes for children with special educational needs.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
With many schools across England and Wales now on holiday for Easter, or with a break imminent, The Guardian is reporting that many GCSE and A-level students are being advised to begin revising in earnest. Experienced teachers and education experts alike are making the recommendations so students avoid exam stress. Across the UK, close to 2 million teenagers will be preparing for exams, with students in England and Wales and Northern Ireland sitting their first papers on May 16th. Many teachers already know that the secret to reducing stress is good preparation, and that a little bit of stress during the break might well avoid super stress in the future. The article features comments from Daisy Christodoulou, former teacher and the Director of Education at No More Marking. Christodoulou recommends revision strategies such as self-quizzing, rather than rereading and highlighting notes, and advised that revision for each subject or topic be spaced over days rather than crammed into one. But the advice also focused on leaving time for rest, relaxation, and getting a good night's sleep, as these activities also help retain information in long-term memory. A new north-south divide is highlighted in the Manchester Evening News. It focuses on newly released government data which shows that there are 8 parliamentary constituencies where there are no schools or sixth form colleges, state or private, offering A-levels, with all but 2 in the north of England. An MP in one of the affected areas said it was unacceptable to not have a sixth form in her constituency. In Bolton West, one of the 8 areas on the list, local Tory MP Chris Green said that having gone to a secondary school with a sixth form, I'm quite surprised by the number of schools without one. According to the Northern Powerhouse Partnership lobbying group, the Greater Manchester Borough of Bury has not a single school with a sixth form, though it does have 2 further education providers offering other post-16 qualifications. Former Children's Commissioner Anne Longfield said, "It's shocking that some children are growing up in areas of the country where there is no provision for them to study A-levels, and doubly shocking that so many of them are in the north." As part of the government's recent Levelling Up white paper to tackle regional inequalities, 55 so-called education cold spots, many of which are in the north, will get extra investment. Struggling schools would be offered more support and new selective sixth form colleges created. But Northern Powerhouse Partnership Director Henry Murison said the selective sixth forms aren't the answer to problems. A story on the Mirror Group newspaper website focuses on talks to introduce a new GCSE which will focus on the environment and sustainability. School Standards Minister Robin Walker said talks were underway with Exam Board OCR, with a view to introducing the course. He stated, "The department is exploring proposals for a new GCSE in natural history. This is after a range of campaigners expressed concern about how subjects such as climate change, sustainability and environmental protection are being taught in primary and secondary schools." This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, this week you may find you have a bit of time on your hands, so why don't you learn a new skill? I'm talking learning to code. There's loads of ways to get started for free. Check out Scratch from MIT, a block-based programming language. There's tutorials and a huge community of people who share their work. Imagine if your next presentation to the pupils was done through a game. The limit is only your imagination. If you want to get a bit more serious and you have a child to drag along with you, take a look at the Astro Pi Challenge. There's Mission Zero. Spend an hour and program a Raspberry Pi in the International Space Station and get a certificate of where and when the pupils' code ran. If you want to get really involved, check out Mission Space Lab, where you need to invest a bit more time, but there's also some free kit for school involved. Do you just want some me time? Then look no further than EduBlocks or Trinket. These browser-based editors come with tutorials to get you going. Their tutorials help you cross over from blocks to text-based coding. If you want to be supported in coding, why not join me for an introduction to Python on May the 4th, 4 to 5 p.m. I'm going to teach an introduction to Python coding in Trinket. Any Teacher Talk Radio listener can come for free. Details of how to join will follow shortly. As always, don't forget to check out the TT Radio 2022 Twitter feed. Tell us what you want to know about tech. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
We're back again with the lovely Emma Heyderman talking about her teaching journey and the work that she has been doing. And now I'm going to get on to some of her more current things. Before I do that, I've got a couple of questions for you, Emma. You've obviously been incredibly successful as a writer, as a academic manager, as a teacher trainer. I know you do a lot of conference presentations. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. What do you think is your unique skill that's helped you to be so successful?
Oh gosh.
Or are there several?
Yeah. I guess it's just kind of that determination, that kind of believing that I can probably do it. That kind of. I mean, there are loads and loads of brilliant people out there in the world. You know, people who possibly do things much, much better than I can. But that kind of belief that, well, if so many people can do it, then I can probably do it too. I don't know if that's making any kind of sense. So yeah. The kind of, well, if somebody asks me to, work on a book with them and they say, can you do it? I just kind of think, well, I think I probably can. It's that kind of, well, I'll give it a go. And if I can't, I'll ask for help. So I think it's a bit of a combination of that kind of wrapped in that kind of determination. I'm going to do it, that kind of stubbornness.
Okay. No, that's it's a mixture of courage, really, and confidence.
I think so. I mean, I'm not. It's funny because I'm not necessarily the most confident person. I mean, if you were going to meet me, you talked about conferences. I was, we've just gone back to face-to-face events, which is just wonderful. And I was kind of watching myself at this face-to-face event, and I really was the person sitting at the back of the room, being really shy to participate. And I mean, I'm not one of these overly confident people who walk into a room and talk to everybody. So yeah, it's kind of that. I guess it's just a kind of, I'm just going to push myself. So if I've got to dive off that diving board, I've just got to do it because I've got that far. So I'm just going to do it.
Do you do the same when you're presenting?
Yeah. I mean, I stand at the front of the room and I look at all those people and I think, oh, I can't do this. And what if they laugh at me? And what if this is a complete flop? And then I don't know. I just kind of say, right, you've got to do it. It goes back to that diving board. I can remember as a child, there was a swimming pool which had these really, really high boards, and standing at the top of the board with my friends behind me, just going, you can do it, you'll love it. And it's that kind of feeling. It's just, once you jump, you're actually fine. It's that, okay, come on, just do it, just go for it.
Yes, I remember bungee jumping in New Zealand many, many years ago, and it really did. The poor guy who was up there with me said, I can't push you. You're going to have to jump. I was like, I don't want to. Why am I here?
Did you do it?
I did it. Yeah, I did it.
Oh, well done.
And after I jumped, I didn't really like the fall at all, but I loved the bouncing and being able to look around afterwards. But I did kind of think, I thought, gosh, it's such a lot of money. I could have bought myself a really nice pair of shoes instead of putting myself through this. But I did it.
You did it. I mean, you raise a really interesting point there, because I would never go bungee jumping. And I think that's another thing, that kind of awareness of what you can't do. I mean, there are things that I will never do and I have turned down, because I just know that's not me, and that's just taking me so out of my comfort zone that let's call on somebody else to do that.
Yes, I think I was kind of pushed into it. I didn't really have. I was on holiday with friends, and we all drove up, and they just said, "You're going," and I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to."
No.
But I did.
I mean, we could talk about this for hours as well. I mean, the worst thing I've ever done is rafting in Victoria Falls. Well, not actually in the waterfalls themselves, but underneath. And so we're on the boat, and it was a bit like what you say. We were with a group of people, and they said, come on, it's fine. And you're in the boat. And at the beginning, it's absolutely fine until the guide says, and there are crocodiles in the water. He was lying, of course, it wasn't true.
Really?
But, and then when the boat actually flips, you kind of think, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? What am I doing? But I think as on a professional level, it's that, when you get to that point where it's a bungee jump that I know I'll never, even if I had a group of friends around me, I just wouldn't do it. I think it's that, just realizing there are some things that you're just going to say no to because you can't.
I think Sylvina's just written, she did something similar in Iguazu. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Iguazu Falls. She's having a bit of a giggle at your expense, I think.
Oh.
I mean, I can remember being in northern Australia on a boat, which was notorious for crocodiles, and all of a sudden, because crocodiles, I don't know if you know, they people study them, or car makers study them because they're so aerodynamic. They don't. You can't see them coming. They just appear, and the water doesn't ripple. And all of a sudden, this 9-meter crocodile appeared next to us, and we were on a flat boat. And a whole lot of people ran over to the other side of the boat to take a photograph, and we were all just like, "Sit down."
Yes, we can flip us. Yes.
Some people don't think of consequences, so maybe that's. Emma, you asked a really good question about conference presentations on social media a while ago. Have you managed to the question was, before you present at a conference, what do you do? Is that correct? Is that the question?
What do you do about your nerves? Yes. And some of the answers were absolutely amazing. I mean, there were such simple things like, there are some stars out there in our world, people like Kath Billsborough, who said, put on makeup and brush your teeth. I think Anna Hasper said the same thing. That is slightly more different at a face-to-face event, because that obviously... for the first face-to-face event, I was put up in a hotel. So I had my breakfast and I went back up to the room and I brushed my teeth, as Kath had told me to do, and I put on my lipstick and brush your hair. I think online it is slightly easier. So online you make sure you're wearing your bright red top or whatever color you like, and you brush your teeth and you get your lucky cup next to you and take a deep breath and go for it.
A ritual, yes.
Yes, a ritual. And face-to-face, I was so nervous about that, because it was, having done online training for 2 years, I had things like, what do I do about the chat box? how do I stop people from talking out of turn? How do I set up talking? I mean, I had all those questions in my head. And actually, it was Anna who wrote to me and said, "Don't worry, it will all work. It always worked. It worked in the past, and you'll just, you'll get back in there, and it will be amazing." And she was absolutely right. The first one I did, I think I mentioned this to you. I give talks in Spain, and in Spain, it's okay just to talk at the same time as somebody else is talking. So I was giving the presentation, and there was a group at the back who were talking at the same time. And I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? I can't do this. I can't give a talk when there's a group of other people having a separate conversation.
And they're not young learners, are
No,
they?
no. So I can't even say I'll call your parents or whatever. So I just stopped talking. Because I was so shocked by it. And I just kind of looked at them and said, in fact, I didn't need to say anything. They stopped talking, but I was thinking, can I really say to them, if you've got something to say, share it with everybody? I thought, no, I can't say that. Or do you have a question? Or it was difficult, but luckily they stopped talking. And actually at the end of the conference, they came up and said, they were really embarrassed. And they said, we are so sorry. We were so excited about what you were saying that we were talking to each other. And we were talking, we promised we were just talking about what you were saying, but we were just getting, a bit excited about it. So the next day I gave another event, and I said at the beginning, look, if you don't mind, when I'm talking, would you mind just listening to me? But I will stop and I will give you lots of breaks so that you can talk to each other. And that just works so much better. I mean, that's kind of young learner training, isn't it? That kind of explaining the rules at the beginning.
Exactly, the housekeeping at the beginning,
Yes,
and also, setting. It's signposting, really, isn't it? It's letting them know what you expect for them and what you're going to give them. So it makes, I'm glad you reminded me of that. I'm going, I'm preparing.
Right.
I know I'm going to see you soon in Venice, but
yes.
I haven't been to a live conference for years, and it's kind of it's really daunting. I mean, I can do webinars now, and I can go online, but now the whole thought of and what if my fear is, when you feel anxious and your voice kind of, or your throat
Dry.
it closes, and then I can't breathe, and then I have a coughing fit. But I think Anne Robinson gave me some really good advice when I was feeling like that doing webinars, and she just said, get some spray, throat spray, the stuff you use when you've got a sore throat, and before you start, spray your throat.
That's great advice.
And it just sort of calms, relaxes.
Yes,
I think it might actually anesthetize you, so you don't do that.
Yes. Because whatever you do, don't eat. Don't take a sweet, because I've done that before and started choking on the sweet. Or spitting it out. We won't go down that road.
Coughing it on someone in the audience.
Yes. I mean, the other thing I noticed was the other problem, of course, is getting the audience to be quiet, because they're so excited to work together and talk about things. So go back to all your young learner things, the counting down to stop, or I don't know if you're a singer or whatever.
And also maybe allowing them to have, planning that time for them to work together and chat.
Absolutely.
That takes, I always find I much prefer starting something and handing it straight over to them so that I can calm down and they're talking, not me.
Yes, absolutely. And getting lots from them and getting them to feedback what they've been saying. Yeah.
So in your freelance life, what projects are you working on at the moment?
Yeah, so I've got two projects. One of them is incredibly exciting because it's just been kind of launched this week. I'm actually working with NILE on one of their new online courses, which is going to be in teaching teenagers.
Excellent.
It's exciting because I know there are a couple of very, very good courses in teaching young learners, but I'm not sure there's actually a course in teaching teenagers. I'm not sure if one actually exists. So this is one of the NILE ones, which I don't know if some of the people in the audience have done, or whether you've done one of them. So it's kind of like
Planning to, but yes.
they've got
Planning to
so
soon.
many.
Yeah.
So it's an 8-week course where you look at different aspects of this. So you begin with the kind of teenage brain, teenage motivation, teenage behavior, then go into kind of aspects like, so how do you plan a good lesson with teenagers or a successful lesson? Looking at things like presenting language, developing skills, assessing progress, because that for me is a huge area. The whole area of assessment and homework, and really kind of exploring the idea of, why do we give homework? Do we just give homework because we think we should be doing it? What's the purpose of homework? Then we'll also be looking at what's really, really important is, do all your students have a voice? So this is the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
So I think it should be a really, really interesting course.
Sounds brilliant.
No, go on. I was going to say, I mean, there are other really exciting things we've managed to do. We've managed to actually get interviews with teenagers. So kind of asking teenagers about their own motivation and their behavior, and asking them about things like how they feel about tests and homework. So I think it should be really, really interesting for teachers to kind of listen to what teenagers have to say, and then kind of getting their own opinions and just discussing it. I'm excited anyway.
Sounds great. Did or does your psychology background, did that influence the choice of topics for the course, or was that?
That's a really good question. I don't think it influenced the topics. What it influenced was the way I approached it, if that makes sense. Because when I did psychology, and we're talking about a long time ago, I mean, I did my degree 32 years ago. We did a lot of research. So, and we were taught how to properly design a good question, how to think about the method. How are you going to explore the question? How are you going to do the research? And how are you going to report on it afterwards? So as part of the course, the participants will also be doing some mini action research and really be kind of drilling down what makes a good question. So, for example, a good question is not something like, why do my students always misbehave? Because, how would you answer that? A good question would be something really, really specific, like, what happens when I write on the board and turn my back on my students?
Wow.
And so what you would do is go in the classroom with that question and you would answer it. So you would look around, see what your students were doing, write it down, and then at the end of the class, you could then analyze it and think about, so what are they doing? When I turn my back, well, some of them are watching me, some of them begin talking to each other, some of them are switching off or whatever.
Some of them are turning on their phones underneath their desks.
Under the table.
Checking that message that they've been dying to
check.
Check.
Yes.
I think
and then taking that even further forward, if they really are just checking that message, does that actually matter? I mean, does that actually interrupt their own learning and the people around them's learning? So, kind of really getting people to think about what's happening, what I'm doing, how I'm reacting, etc., etc. So I think my psychology degree, maybe not the theory, because I did do it a long time ago, but it definitely has influenced the kind of method we'll be using, or the methodology.
Really sounds really, really interesting.
I hope so.
And
I hope so. Yeah.
You've written several course books, and you create materials. What does the future hold for you in terms of materials?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually got my second project that I'll also talk about, and that would be the consultancy project.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, I'll answer your first question about materials. I mean, as far as materials writing, my niche is definitely secondary. I'm definitely a secondary school writer. So I write books for teenagers, or also for teenage exams as well, trying to make the material more interesting, more accessible. Even if they're having to prepare for an exam, making it just a little bit, just to challenge them on a different level, not just a linguistic level, but a kind of getting them thinking a bit. I also recently wrote some stuff for an adult business course at a really high level, C2 level, which I loved. It was, so I'd also like to explore some of the other areas. If I could do a little bit of different writing, I wouldn't say no to that.
I mean, there's so much of a need for C2 material in general. For those listeners who are not familiar with ELT teaching, that is, we have the Council of Europe framework of reference, and C2 is the highest level, and there is a real lack of resources at that level. So that's great. Great to know.
Yeah. So I would, if there's anyone out there, I wouldn't say no to something that wasn't secondary or exams.
And consultancy. I mean, I would love you to come down to my university and sort out our departments. I'm not going to say any more on that, but we're having serious interdepartmental arguments about assessment in particular.
Right. I think we talked about this as well. It's a bit like if you write an email, a really, really important email. So say, for example, you're just even writing to your bank because they've made a mistake. And so you write your email. Well, what would you do? You'd normally get somebody else to look at it and read it, and give you some feedback on it. With the same with materials writing, you'd get somebody, you would never write something and it gets published. Somebody would always look at it and give feedback. And what you want that person to be is somebody who comes in from the outside, somebody objective with no agenda, who is just able to be that other pair of eyes. And that's the kind of thing I do. I mean, I work already as an inspector for International House and also for Equals. And it's that just going into a school with the kind of methodology I was talking about before, with some very, very, very simple questions, going in there with none of my own agenda, answering my questions or whatever framework we agree to, and being able to feed back to the school and say, where the strengths are and where are areas where possibly they could improve. And if they need to improve, possibly offering some alternatives if that's what they want. Some schools don't want to hear your alternatives. They just want a kind of breakdown of what things are going well and where they could improve. But other schools are very, very interested in suggestions for further improvement. So as a consultant, that's the kind of stuff I do. And that's my next project. That's what I'd like to kind of do a lot more of.
And in general, the feedback that you get from the centres or the schools that you go into, what kind of feedback do you get from them? Worded that question very well. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean, presumably you're kind of saying, how do they react to the kind of stuff I'm offering them? Do they find it useful? Is that the kind of question? Yeah. I think so. It's a really tricky thing, feedback. If we all think back to, you work really, really hard on something for your French teacher at school, for example. I can remember doing this. I worked hours on this essay. I handed it to my French teacher and she sent it back to me with a C and said, you could do better. So I think that's the problem, that we all suffer from feedback. We all, however constructive it is, it's the first reaction is, oh. But then, if the person giving the feedback is constructive, so if you work with somebody who kind of says, well, this is really working well, an area where I've identified where maybe we could improve is this, and you never impose your own agenda. So it's never, I believe in this kind of education, so that's what you should be doing. It works, and they are, on the whole, incredibly grateful. It's almost like, I'll tell you what else it's like. When I was working in Lacunza, I used to, with very, very new teachers, offer to teach their class for them. So I would teach the class and they would observe me teaching. And what I found was I would be observing myself because I had somebody in the room watching me. I was also observing myself. So the fact that I go into another school encourages them to also observe themselves. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah. And self-observation is something that is probably the most beneficial tool. I think that's one of the outcomes of the pandemic, is being able to, record yourself or video yourself. Things are much more accessible.
Yes.
Strangely,
Yes.
things we didn't think about.
Yes.
But recording yourself in class. I
Yes.
can remember when I was at the BC and doing sort of academic management, it took us ages to get the right equipment for self-observation. And then they disappeared and things like that. But, there was a lot of time spent looking at the technology, whereas post-pandemic, there is just so much more information out there.
Yes.
In particular,
Or webinars. We spent hours in our school. It was in Lacunza because it has something like 11 branches, 120 teachers, and people kept saying, "Can't you record the training sessions?" And we said, "Oh, but we don't have the technology." Well, suddenly you go through the pandemic, and anything's possible.
Yeah, it is, and it makes for greater sharing of information, sharing of learning.
Yes,
It
absolutely.
is. There are lots of benefits, I think.
Yes. And it's a bit like we should hold on to what worked, but not lose that kind of human touch, because I think the human touch is what you'll feel in Venice. Jane and I will both be at the Equals conference in Venice, and what Jane's going to experience, that I experienced a couple of weeks ago, is my brother had a really good word for it. You can kind of smell the interaction. Which, it's kind of like, when you're standing, it's not that I want to smell you, but I don't say it in a really polite way. Obviously Jane and I have had a lot of conversations and we've done a lot of webinars together, but we've never been in the same room together.
No.
So I still haven't smelt her, which I don't mean I'm going to go up to her like an animal, but it's kind of like that.
It would be really, really nice. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm also,
me too.
getting my. I'm going to finish with a couple of silly questions.
Okay.
I think we should have another conversation further down the track, particularly about teenagers. I think it's fantastic that you have a course coming up. I also like the way you approach teenagers and really getting into them, and I think that's something that is missing with not everyone, but many teachers have difficulty teaching teenagers because they're not fully understanding them. And I think that's just so important. I'd just love to have you back.
No problem.
Emma, if you were a type of food,
Oh gosh.
what would you be? Coming from a foodie area.
Yeah, foodie area. So I guess I'd have to be a plate of pinchos. So the pinchos are the Basque tapas. These are the little snacks that are on the bar. I'm not expensive. I mean, in the Basque country, these pinchos are incredibly expensive. They're like €3 each. And if you wanted to fill yourself up, you'd need to have about 5 of them, so we're talking like almost €20 for snacks. But I would be a plate of pinchos. Why? Because I often feel I'm just a little bit of everything, but nothing of a whole. So I can do a lot of little things, but I still, maybe, I don't know what I am as a whole yet, if that kind of makes sense.
That does, yeah. And as we don't say it a lot anymore, but you're an eclectic variety of skills and interests.
Yes. So I'm a plate of pinchos. I'm a bit of a mix in there.
There is a similar thing in Venice. The name does escape me, but we'll have to try that out.
We'll have to try them. Maybe are they called antipasti? Is that
They're not antipasti. They have a special name, and I can't remember it.
Right.
It will come to me if I don't stress about it. If you could switch lives with someone for a day, who would you choose?
That's a really difficult one. Well, you said someone, so I'm going to say my cat. She's got a name, and she's definitely a she. Why? She has such a great life. She is allowed out, so she's not just a flat cat. We live in an apartment, but we also have a terrace, and she can get out of our terrace and roam around the neighbouring mountains a bit. Well, we live on a hill, it's not really a mountain, so she can go through the grassland. And she just has, she's very, very independent. She eats when she wants. There's always a bit of food in her bowl. And, when she fancies just lying around on a bed all day, that's what she does. When she wants a bit of a cuddle, that's what she does. And when she just fancies getting out there and doing what her stuff, she does. So
That sounds
possibly,
brilliant.
yeah,
That's
possibly
like
her.
me, like I'd love to be my dogs.
Yes.
Today they have just been wonderful. It's the first time they haven't got up
Quiet.
and started running around. I think they're tired. Well, it's the spring air making them all
Yes.
sleepy.
Yes, maybe.
Yeah. Emma, is there anything that you're not very good at?
Oh, lots of things. What am I not?
I know that there are lots of things that you're very good at.
Yeah. No, I mean, there are lots of things I'm not very good at. Oh gosh, that's yeah. What am I not? I mean, okay, confidence. I would say I've got determination, but possibly not confidence. Okay, so me in a teenage class, I go in there and I listen to the teenagers and I prepare these lessons and I think, oh gosh, this is going to work. But when it doesn't work, that breaks me. So I'm not very good at kind of managing my expectations, which I think with teenagers you need to do. So if one teenager halfway through the class says, and the Spanish expression is que rollo, which is, God, that's boring. That just breaks me. So I think I'm not very good at that.
But then you can reflect on it and change it the next time round. I mean, I think life is an ongoing
Yes.
series of there's the things that you teach. It doesn't work. You reflect on that and you change it.
Yes. So I'm not great at moving on. So, so I'll change that when I become a cat because I don't think she suffers too much. Trying to think of something more concrete. I mean, there must be loads of things that I'm not very good at. I wish I was much better at sort of things like mending washing machines or mending cookers or mending cars. I'm not very good at that.
Me neither. But there are plenty of other people who can do that for
But
me.
quite expensive. That's quite expensive for someone else to do that for me. I don't think I'm the world's greatest, and this is going to be terrible on a teaching English site. I don't think I'm the world's greatest language learner. I can speak good Spanish, but I haven't lost my accent. So possibly I'm not that kind of musical person who learns how to speak languages and
I think
speaks
we
them
have. I
properly.
think there are many teachers certainly in English language teaching profession who are dreadful language learners. But I think knowing that they actually reach those more reticent learners better and they know how to relate to them, which I think is really important. It really helps them. Yeah, some of the best teachers I know still speak Italian with very, very British, Scottish, Australian accents, but they're brilliant teachers. So I wouldn't be worried at all about that. Emma, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Yeah, no, we talked about that one. So so I've only been freelance. It's not been a year yet. So July will mark my year's anniversary. I think where I'd like to be is just to have myself sorted, worked out where my income is coming from. Obviously, my main income at the moment is still the materials writing. I do like being with people. So I would like to either do more teacher training in person or maybe get the consultancy, develop the consultancy idea, be able to travel to other schools, help people. I mean, that's the kind of thing I really like doing. I really like collaborating with other people and working together on a common aim. If we both decide, well, this is where we want to get to, I do enjoy doing that and working with other people to get there. So I think that's where I see myself in 5 years.
Sounds absolutely brilliant. Unfortunately, we are going to have to end this lovely conversation, Emma, but we will resume it in a couple of weeks' time. So looking forward to meeting you. And for anyone who would like to catch up with Emma or follow the work that she's doing, her website is From ELT to Infinity, the title of.
And In fact, I plan to explain what that meant. It's from ELT teacher to infinity, because I do think we're so lucky in our profession. I think once you become an ELT teacher, and when you think about the kind of things you teach, in one day you could be teaching, I don't know, a pilot from the airport, their 4-year-old child, a couple of teenagers. You could be teaching a group of seniors who've recently retired. So I think once you've got the skills as an ELT teacher, I think you could do just about anything.
Yeah.
And that's where the infinity comes from. I think we're so lucky that in our field.
I totally agree with you. Oh, I do agree with you. I can remember once a person that did the CELTA with us came down to Naples to visit us on his boat, because he just he landed a training job, but they liked the skills that the CELTA gave him, and he was in sort of corporate training and managed to buy a boat.
Oh my God.
And sail down. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's such a there's such a variety in
Yes. I see that Silvina agrees with us.
Agrees. Yes.
Definitely. The world, is infinite for us. There's so much we could do there.
Thank you. Thank you, Emma. Lovely to chat to you. Wonderful to hear your journey and where you're going. And I wish you the very best of luck with all of it.
Oh, thank you so much, Jane.
You take care, and I'll chat with you soon.
Yes.
For those listening, I've just been speaking to Emma Heyderman, and thank you, Silvina. Thank you for joining us. For this afternoon, remember that there is Harry Waters' Drive Home. He's got a very, very special guest this afternoon, and I recommend you all tune in and listen or join the conversation through Podbean. Thank you, everyone. Next week, I will be speaking to Nick Peachy about creating ELT materials. Very much looking forward to that. For now, happy, what day is it today? Gosh, it is International Make Lunch Count Day. So I think that's what I will do. Emma, I hope you have a lovely London lunch, nice pub lunch or something like that. And I'm going off to cook some pasta for my kids. Have a lovely day, everyone. Thank you for joining, and I'll see you at the same time next week.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.